This is the Cadillac ELR. It is awful. Today I've rented this car here in the Detroit area, where every single ELR was sold. I've rented this car from Turo, which is this company that lets you rent other people's cars instead of the same normal, boring rental cars. Turo has given me a budget to rent cars, and I've decided to use it today to show you the ELR and all of its many problems. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of the ELR and show you all of its quirks and features, and believe me, there are many. Then I'm going to get inside and tell you what life is like on the road in the ELR. And for more of my thoughts, click the link below to go to autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've written a long column about the ELR, and also I've compiled a list of the strangest electric vehicles currently for sale on AutoTrader. But before I do that, I need to give you a little overview of the ELR, because unless you're a huge car geek, you may have never even heard of this thing, and you've probably never even seen one. The ELR came out in 2014. It's a plug-in hybrid, and it was supposed to be a luxury version of the Chevy Volt. But the problems were obvious from the very beginning. What problems, you ask? Well, let's start with the most obvious one. Like I said, the ELR was supposed to be a luxury version of the Chevy Volt, a Cadillac interpretation with sharp styling and more splendor. Unfortunately, it didn't have quite enough splendor to account for its sticker price. A new 2014 ELR was $76,000. Maybe even worse, the ELR had 2 fewer doors than the Volt, so that sticker price actually lost you a huge amount of practicality. So you're thinking, okay, fine, it's only got 2 doors, so what? It's a more sporty version of the Volt with more power. And indeed, you're right, this car does have more power than the Volt. The Volt, which by the way started at $35,000 or less than half the price of this car, think about that, the Volt had 149 horsepower. This car had a raging 207 horsepower. That's right, 207 horsepower in a car that weighed over 4,000 pounds for $76,000. Vroom, vroom. But the ELR didn't give away performance to gain impressive efficiency. In fact, the ELR could only go 39 miles before the battery was finished and the backup gasoline engine kicked in. And that's right, 39 miles on the electric powertrain for $76,000. And this wasn't some 1990s first attempt at a plug-in hybrid electric car. This was made up until 2016. There might even be some stragglers left new on dealership lots. Oh, and speaking of that gasoline engine, it was a 1.4-liter 4-cylinder with 83 horsepower. So when the electric powertrain was finished with its massive 39-mile range, you were stuck driving around in a 2-door Chevy Volt with 83 horsepower that cost you $76,000. The craziest thing about the ELR to me always was that Cadillac couldn't even really play the patriotic American card with this car. They couldn't say it was the patriotic rival to the Japanese and European luxury brands trying to come steal our luxury electric vehicle sales. That's because at the same time this car was being made, Tesla was making the Model S, which was faster, with a longer EV range, more power, it had more acceleration, it was more fun to drive, it was more practical with more cargo space and more passenger room, it was cooler, more modern, more technology, it even had a lower base price, which begs the question, why would anyone buy this for $76,000? It's confounding. But anyway, the ELR makes up for all this stuff with its impressive luxury and equipment, right? Let's check out the quirks and features. We'll start up here with this giant slab of roof. It's here because the ELR didn't have a sunroof. Not this ELR didn't have a sunroof. No ELR had a sunroof. It wasn't even available. Remember, this is a $76,000 vehicle. Now maybe you're thinking, well, I don't really need a sunroof. I've never used my sunroof, that's okay. But in this case, a little extra light, actually a lot of extra light, would be nice in this interior because take a look at these blind spots. The forward blind spots were bad. The windshield base is really far away from the driver for some reason, requiring massive, thick A-pillars that go way too far forward and block your vision. Not only do they hide pedestrians, but they hide entire buildings. But the blind spots in back are way worse. Everyone jokes about how the Chevy Camaro has such terrible visibility, but that's because most people have never had the chance to drive an ELR. Moving on to tech features, the ELR has blind spot monitoring and the seat vibrates if you start to stray from your lane, but you know what it doesn't have? Automatic wipers. That would be kind of nice. You know what else it doesn't have? A couple of weeks ago I was in an Escalade and it had this cool heads-up display in front of the driver. It projected onto the windshield the speed you were going, the speed limit, the radio station you were listening to, a lot of other stuff. It was really cool. This thing, even though it has this giant windshield that goes so far forward they could probably project a drive-in movie onto it, it doesn't have any of that stuff. How come? For $76,000. Another interesting, disappointing ELR quirk is the trunk. Now the trunk opening is surprisingly wide, which is of course a good thing, but it's really strangely narrow. This is a normal computer bag, about the size of a normal laptop, and it barely fits in. Look at this thing. This is all the opening you get for this rather large trunk. And since we're talking about the back, we have to talk about the back seats. Remember, anyone buying this car paid double the price of a Volt for less practicality. Just how much less? Well, here's my attempt to climb into the back seats. And now here's my attempt to climb out. That was easy. But believe it or not, getting in and out of the rear seats isn't the most annoying thing about them. The most annoying thing about them is the way they fold. Let's say by some miracle you get some large item into the trunk and you want the seats to fold down so you can fit it all into the passenger compartment. Well, fortunately the seats fold down, except only the seats fold down. They're in a 40-20-40 split, and the 20 is the center console, which remains fixed. You can't put it down. So you can fold both of the back seats down, no problem, except for any larger item, it's just gonna be stuck because of the center console, which is always in place. It's almost like they've engineered the practicality out of this car. Who could have possibly thought that was a good idea? For $76,000! Okay, so there are a lot of drawbacks about the ELR, and I haven't even driven it yet, but there are also a few things that I like about it. One of those things is the styling. Say what you will about its price, performance, practicality, all that stuff. This is a nice looking car. It has gorgeous lines, sharp angles, sizing is perfect, it really looks beautiful, and it doesn't look like it's based on some existing General Motors architecture, or that they had to scrunch this design up to fit on the Chevy Volt platform. This thing came out really well. In fact, I'm a little bit disappointed that General Motors wasted this good design on this car. Another feature that's part futuristic, part a little bit annoying is the doors. This car doesn't have normal, boring door handles. This car is the future. So the doors open electronically on the outside. You slide your hand under the door opener area, you pull a little button, and then it opens right up. Now, in order to get out of the ELR, you push a little button on the door where you'd expect the door handle to be, just like in the Chevy Corvette of this era. If your battery goes dead and you can't figure out how to get out, there is a little emergency pull tab mounted on the floor. Another cool ELR feature is the gauge cluster. It looks super high-end and very futuristic. It shows your EV range, what your engine's doing. It all looks pretty well put together, very high-tech. Of course, I also thought that when they put it on the Volt originally. The last cool ELR feature, yes, there are only 4, and that honor goes to the cool compartment located under the infotainment screen. You'll never know it's there unless you know, which means you can store stuff in it you don't want people to find. So we already knew the ELR didn't seem like a $76,000 car on paper. And now we know it doesn't have the equipment or the features of a $76,000 car, but maybe it drives like a $76,000 car. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna take it out on the road and find out if that's true. All right, I'm driving the Cadillac ELR. I'm driving around the Detroit area, which is about the only area where you wouldn't be embarrassed to drive this car, because you pull up next to somebody and they're like, they know why you have it. They're like, oh yeah, GM friends and family discount, and you're like, yeah. And they're driving like a Saab 97X, and you're like, you too? And then, yeah. Now I'm sitting here and I've been noticing there's an enormous amount of vibration in the brake pedal. It's like I'm touching an electric current. Now I'm driving the car, the windshield is a few blocks ahead of me, and I'm sitting here. The AC works well. Also, the interior is nice. The controls are nice. Everything is modern Cadillac. Now, I made a big point about the whole $76,000 thing, but the truth is, I don't think there's anybody in the world who paid that number. If you did, you got ripped off. It was $76,000 in 14. Then there was no 15. The sales were so bad, Cadillac just skipped the model year. They came back for 16. They dropped the price 11 grand to $66,000, 65. Still nobody was buying it, and so eventually Cadillac just canceled production after 2 non-consecutive model years. That's when you know you've really had a bad run. 2 non-consecutive model years with an $11,000 price cut in between them. It actually doesn't feel slow. It certainly feels quicker than the Volt. There's no doubt about that. I'm pulling out here. It's not terrible. It's just that you get all your power down low. So now I'm going 38 and it's like, that's it? That's all? Handling's fine. It's not that great. The steering is somewhat precise. Guess what? It's not that great. These things are all fine. The problem is 76 grand. They better be better than fine. It is crazy how much you can't see back there. Crazy. The mirrors are enormously wide to make up for this, and they help. They do help. I wonder how many times I've said $76,000 today. The thing is, this isn't a bad car. It never was. It was pretty good. It was stylish. It had a lot of stuff. It was pretty comfortable, and it would have been a great car at $45,000. And I mean that. At $45,000, even without the 2 rear doors, you could kind of say, well, it's a little more stylish, it's a Cadillac. It's almost insulting to think that they would price it at 76. And the other thing is, yeah, nobody really paid 76, but Cadillac must have thought they could have sold it there, otherwise they wouldn't have suggested that retail price. So no matter how many incentives and dealer markdowns there were on these cars, somewhere someone in the Cadillac chain said, we could get 76,000, that's the right number. And it's like, did you drive the car? So you've seen it, ladies and gentlemen, the Cadillac ELR. This is a car I've always wanted to review, but I've never been able to find one, probably because nobody wants to admit that they own one. Nobody wants to admit that they spent 76 grand on a 2-door Chevy Volt with a Cadillac badge. And I don't blame them. Fortunately, I found this one. Ah, the magic of Turo. And now it's time for the Doug score. Starting with the weekend or enthusiast category, styling is one of the ELR's strong suits. It's absolutely better than average, though I'd hesitate to call it really beautiful. It gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration is a different story. The ELR does 0 to 60 in 8 point something and earns a 1. Handling isn't sloppy or dangerous, but still below average. It earns a 4 out of 10. Cool factor is not a shining spot for the ELR. It's not the least cool car in the world. It isn't a minivan with Skittles between the seats, but you'd never brag about your ELR ownership. It scores a lowly 2. And as for importance, the ELR simply isn't. It isn't a throwaway car, but we'll never really remember it, except for being bad. It earns a 3, bringing its total weekend score to a mere 16 out of 50, meaning you'd rather drive my Range Rover on the weekends than an ELR. Moving over to the daily category, the ELR is relatively well equipped, offering most of the latest safety stuff and some nice new tech, but it stops short of a really high score because, it doesn't even have a sunroof. It earns a 7 out of 10. Luxury measures comfort and smoothness, and the ELR is better than a normal car, but not by a wide margin. It gets a 6. Quality measures reliability and materials used. Both seem above average, but not hugely. It gets a 6 there too. For practicality, the ELR has 10.5 cubic feet of trunk space, earning it a 3 out of 10. Those tiny back seats would normally bring down the score, but its excellent fuel economy keeps it from falling. Finally, value. The ELR would score a horrible 1 if we were going by its new price, but this category measures current pricing, and depreciation has wreaked havoc on this car, with many examples in the high $20,000 range, a $50,000 value loss in 3 years. It's still too much, and the ELR earns a 2 out of 10. As a result, the ELR's total daily score is a mere 24 out of 50, and its total Doug score is just 40, making it the worst car I've ever Doug scored. Of course, with just 3 cars scored, it's also the 3rd best, but there's much more to come.